Welcome back. So we can perform a number of implementation tasks related to the data stores when we are working with the virtual machine infrastructure, or we are working with ESXI data stores. Here you can see that we have a number of options here in the action button. Here you can see that if I want to rename it, or if I want to delete this data store, or if I want to increase the capacity, or if I want to implement number of permission on this data store, so I can perform number of tasks related to the data store. So let's here I just click on the rename button and I'm going to rename the data store. The reason is why, because when you are working in any kind of corporate virtualization infrastructure, make sure that your all data store names must be identical as per industry standards, because there are number of team members working on your virtualization infrastructure, and if you use journal naming structure like data store 1 2 3 4, then no one knows what is inside of the data store, or what kind of data exists inside the data store. So here I'm going to rename this, and as you know, this data store is contain my virtual machine. So I'm selecting the name like VM data stores. Okay, so this data store will be utilized for the purpose of storing the virtual machine. So as I click on the save button and get the refresh, then here you can see that the name will be changed, and if I want to delete it, I can easily delete from here, or I can unmount it, or perform number of tasks on it. And right now I'm going to add another data store to this virtual host, because I have multiple data stores for different purposes. So if I want to add other data store, so the process is very simple. I just right click on this data store and create new data store. As I click on this button, I will get the 4 major options related to the new data store. Number 1 is called create a new VMFS data store. So that is the option which we will use for creating the new data store. If you want to extend existing data store space, or perform other options related to the data store, you can also perform all those functions. But right now we are going with create new VMFS data store. As I click on the next button, here you can see that I have already added another 40 GB of SSD data store to my host machine. So I just click on the next button. Okay, let's it's asking about the data store name. So I will use this data store for the purpose of storing ISO images, ISO and resource sharing data store. Now here you can see that I also implement another standardized naming structure related to the data store. So after it I click on the next button. Data store name should be between 2. Okay, the characters are increases, so I need to be resource share. Okay, so I just reduce the characters in the name of the data store. So click on the next, and here you can see that it's asking me about you are using the full disk or you want to use the custom disk. It's up to me. So I'm going to use the full disk, and right now file system which I require for creating the new data store is called the VmFS 6, which is the latest version. If I need the backward compatibility, or I need or I have legacy VMFS, so I also utilize the VMFS 5, but it's recommended that you have to use the VMFS 6. As I click on the next and click on the finish button, it's now showing that the entire content of the disk are about to be erased. So definitely if you are creating the data store, so VMFS file system will format your data store and create space for utilization in the for the purpose of utilization inside the virtualization structure. So I click on the yes button, and within few seconds here you can see that now process is running, rescanning the VMFS process, and within few seconds or within few minutes, it's depend on the size of the data store. This host will create data store within this virtualization infrastructure. So let me refresh it and get the basic idea that still it's working. And let me pause the session for you, and as we done with this creation, now it's created successfully. And now here you can see that previously we have only one data store, but right now we have two data stores related to the storage deployment related to the virtualization infrastructure. Here you can verify it. Right now the first one was VM data store, which is used for the purpose of virtual machine storage. Here you can verify the VMFS file system right now. Okay, and the newer data store is mentioning over here. I just click on it, and if I'll browse the data store and create a number of folders according to my own requirement. Let's say I'm using this data store to make the repositories of my ISO images, which we will use for the purpose of operating system installation. So you have to reserve the data store for different purposes. That you know that when you are creating the virtual machines, different types of operating system will be required to you for the purpose of installation. So you have to done these all tasks in advance and store all the required operating system ISO images into your newest data store. So here, from here, I can create the directory. The first one is called the ISO directory, Windows. Okay, and I in the same manner I'll create with for Linux and Mac OS and different types of OS which we are using in our own enterprises. And we will definitely create other sharing folders for the purpose of resource sharing. So we can perform number of tasks related to the data stores when we are working on our host machine. So let's move further and explore what other tasks we can perform on our data stores.